It's me again, Mr. Perry. I'm here to read you a story once again. This week we are going to be reading one of the stories from How the Whale Became by this fella Ted Hughes. Now, a little introduction on him. You will have come across him before, I know. In year 4 he wrote The Iron Man, which is a great story, also The Iron Woman. He's also very famous as a poet as well. And he's really interested in nature. He liked to be surrounded in nature. He was very inspired by nature. Here's a picture of him fishing in the rain, which I like. He's a pretty cool bloke. He's a very famous poet. You will definitely come across him in secondary school, I think. But as I say, so he was a poet and a writer of stories for children. And he was really committed to that. I've got this. Here's one of the versions of the book. And there's a note from the publisher, so the person who put the book together. And it says, the themes in these fables are ones that the author returned to again and again in his writing for the young. Pride, envy, greed, and how to overcome such shortcomings. How to be comfortable with yourself, and how to make the best of one's own abilities. Ted Hughes was a champion of children. His commitment to their development and self-awareness is well known. He always found time to encourage and never patronised. The pleasure he derived from writing for children and reading to children resonates from these pages. So we're going to have a look at one of these stories today. So he basically took the idea of this idea of a creation story. So how did things came to be the way that they are? And he approached it in a very sort of creative and unusual way. And each of these stories is slightly different, so how each of the animals became. So I will read to you. This is just the introductory page. It gets you the idea of what these stories are about. So, long ago, when the world was brand new, before animals or birds, the sun rose into the sky and brought the first day. The flowers jumped up and stared around astonished. Then, from every side, from under leaves and from behind rocks, creatures began to appear. In those days, the colours were much better than they are now, much brighter, and the air sparkled because it had never been used before. But I don't think everything was so easy. To begin with, all the creatures were pretty much alike, very different from what they are now. They had no idea what they were going to become. Some wanted to become linnets, they're little birds. Some wanted to become lions. Some wanted to become other things. The ones that wanted to become lions practiced at being lions. And by, sure enough, they began to turn into lions. So the ones that wanted to become linnets practiced being linnets, and slowly they turned into linnets, and so on. So we're going to take one of his stories, which is how the hare became. Now, before lockdown, all those months ago, we did some science work on evolution, and you wrote an explanation text on how rabbits came to have long ears. Hares are very similar animals to rabbits. They're quite a bit bigger, got longer ears, they're a bit more powerful, but in many ways they're a similar kind of creature. So it's quite a nice one to look at. And this is Ted Hughes' version of how the hare became. Now, Hare was a real dandy. He was about the vainest creature on the whole earth. Every morning he spent 1 hour smartening his fur, another hour smoothing his whiskers, and another cleaning his paws. Then the rest of the day he strutted up and down, admiring his shadow and saying, "How handsome I am! How amazingly handsome! Surely some great princess will want to marry me soon." The other creatures grew tired of his vain ways, and they decided to teach him a lesson. Now they knew that he would believe any story, so long as it made him think that he was handsome. So this is what they did. One morning, Gazelle went up to Hare and said, "Good morning, Hare. How handsome you look. No wonder we've been hearing such stories about you." "Stories?" asked Hare. "What stories?" "Haven't you heard the news?" cried Gazelle. "It's about you." "News? News? What news?" cried Hare, jumping up and down in excitement. "Why, the moon wants to marry you," said Gazelle. "The beautiful moon, the queen of the night sky. She wants to marry you because she says you're the handsomest creature in the whole world." "Oh yes? You should just have heard the few of the things that she was saying about you last night." "Such as?" cried Hare. "Such as?" He could hardly wait to hear what fine things Moon had said about him. "Never mind now," said Gazelle, "but she'll be walking up that hill tonight, and if you want to marry her, go and meet her." Gazelle pointed up to a hill on the eastern skyline. It was not yet midday, But Hare was on top of that hill in a flash, looking down eagerly at the other side. There was no sign of a palace, no sign of anywhere a moon might live. He could see nothing but plains rolling up to the farthest skyline. So he sat down to wait, getting up every few minutes to take another look round. He was certainly excited. At last, the sky grew grey and dark, and a few stars lit it up. Hare began to strut about so that the moon could see what a fine figure of a creature he was, waiting for her. He looked first down one side of the hill, and then down the other, but she was still nowhere in sight. Then suddenly he saw her. But not coming up his hill, no. There was a black hill on the skyline, much further to the east, and she was just peeping silver over the top of that. "Ah," cried Hare, "I've been waiting in the wrong place. I'll miss her if I don't hurry." So he set off towards her and run. How he ran! Down into the dark valley and up onto the hill on top. But what a surprise he got there. The moon had gone. Ahead of him, across another valley, was another skyline and another black hill. That was the hill that the moon was climbing. "Wait for me, wait," cried Hare, and he set off again down into the valley. When he got to the top of that hill, he groaned. And no wonder. Far ahead of him was another dark skyline and another hill. And on the top of that hill was the moon, standing tiptoe, ready to fly off up into the sky. Without a pause, he set off again. His paws were like wings. He ran on the tops of the grass. He ran so fast. By the time he got to the top of this hill, he saw he was too late. The moon was well up into the sky above him. "I've missed her," he cried. "I'm too late. Oh, what will she think of me?" And he began leaping up towards her, calling, "Moon, moon, I'm here. I've come to marry you." But she sailed on up in the black sky, round and bright, much too far away to hear, and Hare jumped a somersault in pure vexation. Then he began to listen. He stretched up his ears. Perhaps she was saying terrible things about him. Or perhaps, yes, perhaps flattering things. Perhaps she wanted to marry him. Much too much to ever think badly of him. After all, he was so handsome. All that night he gazed up at the moon and listened. Every minute she seemed more and more beautiful. He dreamed how it would be living in her palace. He would become a king, of course, if she were the queen. All at once he noticed he was beginning to come down the other side of the sky, towards a black hill on the west. "This time I'll be waiting for," he cried, and he set off. But it was just the same. When he got to the top of the hill, she was no longer there, but on the other hill further away. When he got to the top of that, she was on the next. And when he got on the top of that, she'd gone down, behind the farthest hills. Hare was furious with himself. "It's my own fault," he cried. "It's because I'm so slow. I must be there on time, then I shan't have to run after her. To miss the chance of marrying the moon and becoming a king, all out of pure slowness." That day he told the animals that he was courting the moon, but the marriage was not yet fixed. He strode in front of them, stroked his fur. After all, he was the creature who was going to marry the moon. He was so busy being vain, he never noticed how the other creatures smiled as they turned away. Hare had fallen for their trick completely. That night Hare was out early, but it was just the same. Again he found himself waiting on the wrong hill. The moon came over the black crest of a hill on the skyline far to the east of him. Hill by hill he chased her into the east over 4 hills, but at last she was alone in the sky above him. Then, no matter how he leapt and called to her, she went sailing on up the sky. So he sat and listened to hear what she was saying about him. He could hear nothing. "Her voice is so soft," Hare told himself. He set off in good time for the hill in the west where she had gone down the night before. But again, he seemed to have misjudged it. She came down on the hilly skyline that was again further to the west of him, and again he was too late. Oh, how he longed to marry the moon. Night after night he waited for her, but never once could he hit on the right hill. Poor Hare. He didn't know that when the moon seemed to be rising on the hill in the east, or falling to the hill on the west, she was really rising and falling over the far, far, far edge of the world, beyond any hills. Such a trick the creatures had played on him, saying the moon wanted to marry him. But he didn't give up. Soon he began to change. With endless gazing at the moon, he began to get the moonlight in his eyes, giving a wild, startled look. And with racing from hill to hill, he grew to be a wonderful runner, especially up the hill, where he just shot up them. And from leaping to reach her when she was too late, he became a great leaper. And from listening and listening all through the night for what the moon was saying high in the sky, he got his long, long ears. And that is Ted Hughes' version of how the hare became. So he wrote lots of these. So he wrote one about how the whale became. According to Ted Hughes, the whale was actually a land animal, but it was living in God's vegetable patch and crushing all the carrots. So God sent him into the ocean. The bee was actually created by almost like a devil, and he had demons inside his blood, and that's why the bee goes and collects nectar to make honey, because he wants to sweeten his blood. There's a really good story about the polar bear. Polar bear thought they were the prettiest animal, and they spend all their time looking in the mirror and winning all the beauty competitions. So the animals took them to a place where it was just full of mirrors, so the polar bear would be happy. And that's why the polar bear lives in the North Pole in Antarctica. So you can have lots of fun with these things, just thinking about different animals, their habitats, what makes them special, the way they look, the way they sound, the way they behave, and you can come up with your own creation stories, and that's what we're going to do this week. So I hope you've enjoyed those stories, and we're looking forward to seeing yours. Thank you very much.